In the realms of Nintendo, they speak of a legend. Of a hero, a champion of good who rises beyond his humble roots with courage instilled and defeats immeasurable evils to save his homeland and its people. Of a long lineage of maidens, royalty descended from a sacred protector, who through their immense wisdom and compassion aid the hero in silencing said evils and leading the people along the right path. Of a man cursed by a primeval demon, his envy and thirst for power twisted into a desire to overthrow the gods and subjugate the world. Their legacy is a legend that spans many tales and takes many forms in many times. I speak, of course, of the Legend of Zelda. One of Nintendo's three pillar IPs, Zelda took the gaming world by storm in 1986 and never looked back. With a stellar track record that includes several of the most critically acclaimed video games ever made, many gamers can trace fond memories back to one or more of them, to the point where it's easy to lose track of time debating over which Zelda game is the best, or over whether its convoluted timeline makes any sense. So yeah, a lot of people care deeply about this series, which is why there's been a lot of outcry over the lack of Zelda newcomers in Smash as of late. Smash 4 saw no new faces from the legend, and its only new addition to Brawl was a semi-clone who was the spiritual successor of a character from Melee. It's got a lot of people disappointed and frustrated. They feel like some of their most treasured memories are getting disregarded, as if Sakurai or someone else decided to wave a cane and stick a block in their way. There's a lot of resentment there, and you don't need some fairy companion to point it out. But I want to try and explain what seems to be going on. It's easy to point fingers when things don't go as you expected, but I don't think there's any malice at play here. Truth is, Zelda's just been a victim of bad timing, more or less. As I've mentioned many times before, the Smash team looks for first-party newcomers who are relevant and recognizable, and Zelda just kinda happened to be smack dab in between major releases when Smash 4's development got going. It doesn't help that Zelda's kinda weird in that its core cast consists mostly of recurring characters, the many Links and Zeldas and often Ganon opposing them, while its newer faces are mostly secondary characters who might not even be high enough priority to get considered. The closest we've seen was Girahim, who wound up as an assist trophy and, for all we know, may have barely missed the cut to be playable, and this was their way of still letting him do something. Whatever the reason, though, for the time being we've had to settle for an admittedly wide range of stages, items, and summons. But that brings us to our challenger today. A new Zelda game is out now, and in case you didn't hear, it's a pretty big deal. With a flagship entry relevant at just the right time, this may be a chance for this newest hero to forge a path into unknown lands. The Legend of Zelda has seen many heroes bear the name Link, but this particular one is very different from his predecessors. Waking up in a strange chamber with quite literally nothing to his name, this Link ventures out into a Hyrule in decline, a fallen kingdom devastated by an eldritch force of nature known as Calamity Ganon. Link later finds out that he fell in battle 100 years prior, forced to spend the entire time since in stasis as a piece of long-lost Sheikah technology brought him back to life. He and his allies had failed to prevent Calamity Ganon's return a century before, and now a magic seal barely maintained by his era's Princess Zelda was the only thing standing between the people of Hyrule and the end of the world. Nothing like waking up to find out all your friends are dead, your homeland's in shambles, and all because you weren't able to stop it in time, right? What's interesting to note is that this Link is much more than a vessel for the player. He has a very distinct personality that shows in places throughout the game. From his excitement over finding something new, to potential snarky responses to NPCs, to this priceless realization that he's about to get up close and personal with a dunk tank, he's lively and animated in a way we've rarely seen before. Even his backstory is more fleshed out. He's the son of a famous knight of Hyrule with the swordsmanship to match. Well, before everything went to hell. There's even an explanation for why he never seems to talk. It's quite the change from many previous Links. It's that combination of fresh personality, unique abilities born from new mechanics, and relevance at the right time that may make this Link a viable newcomer who's been getting slept on a little. It's not the most common or popular opinion. Many Smash fans and speculators are turned off pretty quickly by the idea of another Link being playable, no matter how different he is. To answer those concerns, let's take a more objective look at this. As we know, and as I've emphasized often, Sakurai and his team are most interested in characters who can bring compelling new ideas to Smash, regardless of whether the fans think they deserve the honor. It's less about who they are or what they represent, and more about what they can do. And this Link's natural set of tools is quite different from those of his predecessors. From swords, to spears, to axes and hammers, to many types of bows and arrows and shields, to the magitech stored in his Sheikah Slate, there's a lot of moveset potential to be had. I figure, why dismiss that just because of who he is? While many other speculators may favor other Zelda characters right now, like the other champions from Breath of the Wild or even characters from past titles, I feel like we should give this newest Link a fair shake. So, let's give him that fair shake, shall we? What would the hero of the wild be like in Smash? To do this concept justice, the key is to combine the familiar and the new, just like this Link is both similar to and different than those that came before him. We want to emphasize the unique traits and abilities he's capable of in Breath of the Wild, while using the ones that other Links in Smash have had in different ways than they do. His appearance here is pretty easy to nail down. Champion's tunic, Hylian trousers, Master Sword, we're done. But wait, because it's a little more complicated than that. The reason I'm thinking that ensemble in particular, because that's exactly what Link wears during the various memory flashbacks. And so presumably that's his preferred look when he isn't, grappling with amnesia. No fancy armor, no headgear, not even a shield on his back. The lack of shield to block projectiles when standing or walking, and the fact that he's right-handed instead of left, is one of many ways this Link would stand out from the current two. For his palette swaps, well, we have two different options, but both have potential flaws. The first would be to just give the Champion's tunic 7 other colors, based on some of the colors you can use to dye clothes and armor in Breath of the Wild. Ordinarily, it'd be perfect, except for the fact that you can't actually dye the Champion's tunic. It'd require them to deviate from canon a bit, but honestly I don't see it being a problem when they've taken other such creative liberties before. Alternatively though, we could see them also pull from any of the multitude of armor sets available in the game. Those would come with the baggage of extra development time though, so it's hard to say if any would show up, but I'm sure many of you have at least one you'd like to see. Heading onward, let's get into some details about Wild Link and his attributes. Playstyle-wise, he'd be similar to the other Links in his own distinct way. And like his Twilight counterpart, he'd be a rare example of a zoner who can use both projectiles and disjoints effectively. Though in this case, he'd lean more toward the disjoint side, focusing mainly on keeping space with his array of weapons and using projectiles in more of a supplementary role. Some of that would involve using the tools he has to set up greater damage and control using precise positioning and timing. And on to his stats? A little smaller than you were expecting? Have you ever noticed how this Link is actually notably short compared to a lot of the NPCs he interacts with? Having him be similarly shorter than the other humans or humanoids on the roster would be true to character and be another way he'd stand out next to the taller hero of Twilight. Being a little lighter as well also ties into it. That and he isn't as heavily armored compared to Twilight Link's shield and the chainmail woven into his hero's clothes. Bet you didn't know that was there. This would put Wild Link around the lower end of the cruiserweights, more or less, with the same weight value as Cloud. Meanwhile, his mobility stats are a combination of his natural abilities and the gameplay of Breath of the Wild. His above-average grounded movement reflects his ability to sprint, running faster than Twilight Link but a bit slower than Toon Link. And just like them, his walking speed is surprisingly good. But in the air, he's faster than either of them, though his airspeed is still below average overall. His fall speed's a hair above the default 1.5 because it just kinda felt right. Overall, Wild Link has an emphasis on roaming around the battlefield to obtain the positioning and spacing he wants, just like how you roam the wilderness in his game, and his solid mobility stats for his archetype allow him to do it. But now it's time for the interesting part. Breath of the Wild's revamped combat and weapon systems offer its Link many ways to fight his enemies. We're going to bring that into Smash with a Weapon Master moveset of sorts. While he'll have more attacks using the Master Sword than anything else, most of them will have him pull out other weapons for various uses, just like in his game. We got another full moveset to go over, so prepare yourself. To begin, Wild Link's jab combo pulls from the basic sword attack combo with the Master Sword in hand. One of the middle attacks would be taken out to make this combo the usual 3 hits for a jab. His forward tilt would have him pull out a Traveler's Spear and thrust it forward for a decently quick disjointed poke. His up tilt would have him take out a spiked Boko club and swing it overhead. It'd be quite fast as an anti-air and combo starter, but it'd deal less damage and have less range than his other attacks. For his down tilt, he'd take out a woodcutter's axe and swing it low along the ground, his slowest yet strongest tilt since it's big and kinda unwieldy. But his dash attack is where it gets interesting. where he'd whip out a wooden shield and shield surf on it for a short distance. A multi-hit attack with low hitboxes, he'd cover distance, contest landings, and really screw over low crouches. Animation-wise, he'd have the shield up at a slight diagonal angle facing forward, to emphasize its purpose here as an attack as opposed to being mainly for movement in Breath of the Wild. Wild Link's smash attacks would all have little unique properties. His forward smash has him take out a stronger Knight Spear and perform the multi-strike spear charge attack. Oof, that's a mouthful. Great at dealing damage and covering spot dodges, he'd perform 3 stabs normally and up to 2 more the longer it's charged. But each stab would bring a little more end lag, so keep it in mind. Then for his up smash, he'd take out a Traveler's Bow and launch an arrow at an upward angle. You see, bows and arrows don't really get special treatment in Breath of the Wild. They're just one part of Link's arsenal, so it's only fitting to work them into his A attacks. The arrow would rise at a 75-degree angle, then obey physics and fall back down, dealing less damage than it does on the way up. A solid vertical zoning tool, it'd travel higher the longer you charge it, like Snake's old up smash used to. As for his down smash, the classic spin attack. It's such an iconic move that I wanted to work it in somewhere, and so this remix Link uses it for a remix purpose. Performed with the Master Sword in hand, it'd have its own special trait. The longer you hold it, the greater its range, just like in-game. But again, that range would come with more end lag that'd make it more punishable. It's a strange bunch of grounded attacks, and Wild Link's air game isn't any different. His neutral air is the most conventional of them though. Horizontal swings with the Master Sword in front of and then behind him. With a slight downward angle to each swing, it'd be reminiscent of Robin's Nair, a slightly faster startup but a greater pause between the first and second parts, and knockback that's more diagonal upward than horizontal. His forward air would use the Traveler's Spear again, this time for a diagonal downward stab inspired by his aerial drop attack when wielding one. The stab would be at about a 40-degree angle down with the haft of the spear held over his head for leverage. The move wouldn't spike, but it'd be decently quick and deal a little more damage at the tip. And for his back air, he'd take out the spiked Boko Club again and perform a turnaround swing. Similar to his up tilt, it'd be fast and good for comboing, but with less range and power than the rest of his moveset. For his up air, this one's fun. He'd pop out his paraglider for a brief moment to hit anyone above him. With a big hitbox and good damage, it'd be great for aerial pressure, and it'd also stall his momentum while it's active like Lucario's down air does. This would let him use it to aid his recovery and mix up his landings, while also preventing it from racking up vertical combos like a certain other up air since it halts any upward movement. And for his down air, he'd whip out a bow again and fire an arrow downward. At a 75-degree downward angle, it'd be like his up smash but flipped, and not as strong for obvious reasons. It'd be a high commitment option to potentially aid in landing or pester an opponent lying in wait who gets too impatient, and it'd also help with edge guarding, though the arrow would get weaker the further it fell to keep the latter from being too strong. It's meant to be situational more than anything. This Link's grab would just be a normal one. With no hookshot counterpart, Wild Link would just reach out with his free hand. This would give his grab less range, but also make it faster, probably frame 7 like most weapon users, and therefore better for reacting or punishing out of shield. His pummel would just have him knee his opponent, his forward throw would have him shove them away, and he'd turn around and fling them for his back throw. Kinda basic, right? But his up throw would have him lob them up, take out a bow and stick an arrow in them, and his down throw would have him shove them onto the ground and arrow them from point blank range. These two would be a bit stronger for obvious reasons, and I could maybe see his up throw killing eventually. Its knockback would be more diagonal than vertical though, so you'd need to be near the ledge. Then for a finishing touch, for one of his taunts, I could see him rummaging around unseen pockets, pulling an apple out of hammer space, and taking a bite out of it. It'd be a nod to all the scavenging you do in his game, and a call back to young Link's old taunt. So, how do we round this out? Wild Link's special moves will, mostly, use the Sheikah Slate, a piece of highly advanced lost technology whose various runes allow their users to manipulate the environment. Each of these runes would be very useful and strong on their own, but with a catch. Wild Link's specials, with one exception, can only be used one at a time. So say if you have his neutral special active and you want to use his side special, you can't until the former is finished. Speaking of his neutral special, it's arguably the most useful of the runes, the Remote Bomb. This ability in Breath of the Wild creates a bomb made of solidified light to blow up objects and weak walls or send enemies flying when you detonate it on command. The Smash version of Remote Bomb would work more or less the same way. Press B to create a bomb and throw it forward. At any point after, press B again to make it blow up. Since you control when it explodes, you can create all kinds of interesting setups while also using the threat of it to claim space. And if you double tap B at the start of it, you get an alternate cube-shaped bomb instead. Both types have their own uses. The regular rounded bombs roll and carry momentum, while cube bombs stay in place. Remote bombs are highly versatile and useful tools, sure to be an integral part of Wild Link's game plan. Though keep in mind, you can't use any other runes while a bomb is active, not until a short cooldown after you detonate it. You can also only have one bomb in play at a time, and opponents can pick the bombs up and throw them, at their own risk of course, since you could just blow it up in their hands. Wild Link's side special brings out another rune, Magnesis. The first rune you obtain in a regular playthrough, it's a pretty interesting one that lets you use magnetism to manipulate and or lift anything made of metal. We're going to work Magnesis into Smash in a bit of an interesting way. On command, Link would throw an iron sledgehammer forward, then immediately catch it using Magnesis. From there, you'd use the control stick to move the hammer around freely and bludgeon enemies. With great overall range, the circle maxing out equal to 2/3 of final destination in any direction, and decent movement, it'd be an indirect, commitment-heavy, but very useful method of zoning opponents and forcing them to respond. Pressing B again while you're moving the hammer around would turn the rune off and let go, and the hammer would keep moving with whatever momentum it had immediately before. It'd make for some interesting setups and edge guards, though be careful because it can and will hurt you on contact if you aren't smart about it. The unleashed hammer would shatter on the first surface or fighter it hit, just like when weapons break in Breath of the Wild. Plan accordingly, and Magnesis gives you a weird yet effective way of harassing your opponent or contesting their movement or recovery. But, just like with the remote bombs, you can't use other rune specials until a short cooldown after you deactivate it. Also, you're rooted in place while using it, so don't let opponents get in between you and the hammer and punish you. Wild Link's up special is the black sheep of the set. It's the only one of the main four to not use the Sheikah Slate. Updraft! In Breath of the Wild, Link can use the many updrafts of winds scattered all over Hyrule to ascend with his paraglider and travel to places he'd struggle to reach otherwise. And you can even create your own at will by setting a large enough fire. Smash lets you cut out the middleman and create an updraft of wind on the spot, reaching a little higher than Battlefield's top platform from the ground as Link spirals up it quickly with the paraglider in hand. Once he reaches the top, he's free to glide forward or back with momentum quicker than his usual airspeed. You can interrupt this free glide at any point with an aerial attack, but then you'd go into freefall afterward, like with Olimar's up special. Updraft is both a rising Dragon Punch type move and one that covers greater distance thanks to the glide at the end. Useful as both a defensive punish and an offstage recovery, it's sure to have a purpose. And since it doesn't use a rune, it's available even if one of Link's other specials is active. Didn't want to screw his recovery over like that. Fair warning though, since your only answer to edge guards during the glide leaves you a sitting duck afterward, it leaves you super vulnerable if you have to recover from a low angle, especially if you've already lost your double jump. Anyone who's played Breath of the Wild is probably thinking, hey, wait, why didn't you just go with Rivali's Gale? The move that, lets you create an updraft on the spot? In some ways, it arguably make more sense, but I don't know if they'd be willing to tap into just one of the champion's powers, and adding any others would run the risk of his character concept getting too gimmicky and unwieldy. I could still see it happening, but since Smash concepts tend to keep things clean and coherent and not go too off the wall, I'm hesitant to pencil it in. But if you thought the three specials so far were different, whoo boy. Wild Link's down special is the strangest one yet, Cryonis. In Breath of the Wild, this rune lets you create a block of magic ice from any source of water, light enough to float, yet solid enough to climb and use as a platform. We're going to cheat a little to get it to work in Smash, allowing Link to create a roughly Rosalina-sized ice block on any solid ground directly in front of him, regardless of if there's water there. An active ice block is a fully interactable surface, obstructing everyone's movement and blocking most projectiles, allowing you to control space with it and force opponents to find ways around it. Pressing B again when you're next to an active ice block shatters it, dealing decent damage to any opponent nearby. I know you're probably wondering what happens if someone tries to put one on the ledge. Well, for one, it can't actually cover the ledge. You can put one right next to it, but there'll always be enough room to make the ledge grabbable and allow enough of a neutral getup that even though you'd get pushed back off, you'd immediately re-grab the ledge with your invincibility back. And for two, the ice blocks have their own hit points and can only take so much damage before breaking anyway. And as with the previous runes, you can't use any others until a short time after the Cryonis block is gone. And you can only have one active at a time for obvious balance reasons. And to top it off, quick, think of the most powerful weapon you can get your hands on in Breath of the Wild. For Wild Link's final smash, we're going with a move that I call Ancient Volley. The almighty ancient arrows are powered by a sacred light strong enough to eradicate most enemies in a single hit. And now, we're going to put them to use. With the power of a smash ball, Link rises up and out of sight with a paraglider, then descends into the foreground, whips out a bow, and takes the exact pose shown in his official art. His descent slows down just like in his game as he focuses and takes aim, and a reticle appears on screen. Hold any button to ready an ancient arrow, then let go to fire it on the reticle's location for devastating damage to anyone it hits. It's similar in function to the final smashes of Zero Suit Samus and, formerly, Snake, but it puts more emphasis on individual, precise hits. Each arrow shot is very powerful, but you only get 5 arrows to shoot. Ancient arrows are extremely rare after all, or you might run out of time instead, as a stamina wheel appears next to Link that empties over the course of about 12 seconds. Once either comes to pass, Link falls down and out of sight, and descends back on stage to finish the fight. This is what the hero of the wild can bring to Smash. A brand new hero on a quest to set right what he once failed to prevent, by borrowing the strength of the many heroes before him, putting his own spin on them, and adding in his own distinct style. With a large repertoire of weapons and runes, he follows his own path towards saving Hyrule, wherever it may take him along the way. Wild Link's greatest asset is his versatility, capable of zoning opponents out with both projectiles and disjoints, though given the choice he'd prefer to use the latter. He complements this with strong and very useful specials and solid mobility with ways to mix it up and keep opponents on their toes. And he's actually much more capable of working his way out of a bad situation than his counterparts. That said, he's got some drawbacks, like most of his specials being very high commitment and restrictive despite their usefulness, or that he relies on guessing games to cover his landings, or that his horizontal recovery is easy to exploit, or that his big conversions and kill power aren't quite as strong as those of the other two Links. So, what do you think of this one? Despite all the vocal resistance I've seen toward adding a third Link, I've also seen a surprising number of people who are actually open to the idea. Some actually correctly predicted he'd be our featured challenger. If you were one of them, good on you. This concept's been a long time coming. The basic ideas for it date as far back as almost a year ago, and you can thank GameXplain's feature-length E3 analysis last year to get me to realize this Link could make for an interesting newcomer. This concept's seen a lot of changes over time as well. For example, I considered using the stasis rune at one point as a reflector that stopped a projectile and let you redirect it. Real quick shout out to the real hero of wins, who's been lending me a hand with some of the graphics now, like the character box you see there. Thanks as well to my patrons, who've made these last several difficult months more bearable. If you're interested in lending a hand yourself, once again, there are multiple options available. I've been dealing with a lot of pain and various issues for a long time, and any support you can provide will give me a chance to do something about it. Our next challenger, well, depending on how things turn out, I'm kind of mulling over 2 different options for who to go with next. One of them is a third party who's gone through a resurgence of sorts in recent years. The other, while liked within their home franchise, let's just say if they got into Smash, there'd be a whole lot of salt. I'll leave you to determine who they might be. And so, until next time. By the way, has anyone seen a cooking pot? I'm running low on stuff to heal with, and I'm fresh out of elixirs.